So this is the second webinar in our Asia cohort. The last webinar we had was an introduction to the co-foundry model and how to launch startups, how we understand startups in a lean way according to the co-foundry model. And today we're going to talk about two things. So Luke, who is the person in Nova that is handling the pipeline, is going to be talking about research, very briefly talking about research, what is the kind of research that is expected, or the kind of research, primary research that you can do before you launch a startup in order to know whether your customers have a need, whether your customers have a problem that you are trying to solve, whether the different parties involved in your idea really have a problem, and it can give you a lot of information about how to solve the problem. So there are different methodologies for this, and Luke is going to talk about that. And then the second thing that we're going to talk about, and that's going to be Paul Dodd. Paul Dodd is the head of marketing in Nova. He's going to talk about lean tactics for finding your early customers. So if you want, we can go directly into the first talk, which is going to be a little bit shorter than the second. And if you have any question, you can ask us questions here in the Q&A section. Some people also ask them in the chat. I think it's better if you can ask them in the Q&A, because that will allow you to vote the questions, and we will start answering those questions that are the most popular ones. Here you see also what is coming in the coming weeks. So you see, well, we did the first workshop already last week. Here we have the second one about traction. The third one is going to be on October 28th, and it's going to be a pitching workshop where we are going to tell you how to pitch an idea. As we explained last time, the pitching is mainly about the problem. At this early stage of startups, we care more about the validation of the problem, and the solution is secondary to the validation of the problem at this stage. It wouldn't be at a later stage. Then after that, we are gonna give you the opportunity to book time with us, with Luke, with me, to discuss about your ideas, and we will have a coaching session if you want. We are gonna give you a link where you can book that time. Actually, I'm gonna post the link right now in a message, and in that link you will be able to book time with us. So here you have the link. Just click on there and you can book us. And then finally, we're going to have the demo days. And the demo day is going to be a slot of 10 minutes where you have the opportunity to present your idea. It's going to be, I mean, we will explain in the next workshop how we think the best way to present these ideas or these problems is. There are going to be multiple sessions, and we will tell you in which session you are. So it's going to be either the 10th of November, which is a Tuesday, 11th, Wednesday, or the 12th, which is a Thursday. And then after that, that's the demo day. And after that, there will be a deliberation, and we will do a pre-selection of the different things and different ideas. So these are the workshops. I hope the timeline is clear. We will send you emails to remind you about this timeline. And if you have any question, just please ask the question here in the Q&A section. Okay, so if you want, we can go directly into the first topic, which is very important. Sometimes when you talk to founders, you realize that they are starting to do a lot of things, but sometimes they don't have information, or they have not done proper research about what customers want, right? So the first question that I will have for Luke is, what is the kind of research, particularly primary research, that you would expect a founder to do? What are the different methodologies? What do you expect in a B2C kind of concept? What would you expect in a B2B kind of concept? Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pedro, for that intro. And just before I say anything, just to give everyone some context on the call, when you're engaging with early stage ideas, the traction and the approach to get that traction is probably the number one differentiating factor. So if you're sitting here today thinking, I've got almost all of my insights and business plan nailed on, what can I do to improve my chances of getting through this process? It's absolutely gain more traction and gain more insights as a result of that traction. And those two things are key. One without the other isn't very valuable. If you have 1,000 users signed up, but no insight as to why they've signed up or who they are, that's not very valuable. As well as having a great insight, but having no one validate it or agree to be part of that journey is equally not very valuable. So it's really about the two together. And the bulk of this talk will be from Paul explaining how to gather traction. But when you've got it, what is the best way to process it to gain those key insights? And for us, whether you're B2C or B2B, if you're not engaging in real interviews with customers face to face, or well, screen to screen at least, and noting the outcomes of those calls, what evidence have you got to back up your insight? So regardless of B2C or B2B, we would expect at least a number of well-documented calls with customers. Ideally, it will validate the problem independently of validating the solution. So rather than you calling them and enthusiastically selling them on the concept, you've not even tried to sell them your startup. Instead, you've asked them questions about their current process, the issues they face, and gain a clear understanding of why they would want to work with you is the most important thing. When you engage with investors, you need to have proof of this. So notes written down, email exchanges, and a clear and focused hypothesis of what you were trying to achieve. I wanted to know this about my business, so I contacted this many customers, and here were the results. If you've just had loose conversations, that's no amount of proof or evidence that anyone can see. So in terms of methodology, I always think it's about making an idea of who your customer is, doing anything you can to try and have some conversations with those people. It doesn't have to be big marketing campaigns. It can be reaching out on LinkedIn or finding out a blog that they've commented on with a view that you agree with, and just kickstart the conversation that way. If there's a big, if you feel as if that user has a strong connection with the problem and what you're offering, you can then ask them for referrals and start growing the company this way. Even big companies with millions of users had to recruit their first user manually. And once you start that process, you'll gain a lot of confidence in your own idea as well.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for your insight, Luke. And that kind of leads quite nicely into what I'm going to discuss for the next hour. So I'll be cover the bulk of the topic on this, and it's exactly what Luke says, is in where are the places that we can go to find and initiate, and what are the best tactics and techniques to initiate those very early conversations. And that might be for what we call user panel recruitment, or actually in the early stages for your customers as well. So with covering the next hour, I'll spend a little bit of time just giving a very brief intro about me and my background. Then I'll cover why early users have a different rule set to how you approach them and interact with them as to if you were a scaled business. And then we'll go into a little bit more detail on 11 different places and tactics that you can use to find those early users. Then hopefully there'll be a little bit of time left at the end for Q&A, but as Pedro says, if you do have any, throw them into the chat, and Pedro will be monitoring that, and we'll make a call on whether to stop me or whether to hold them for the end. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of explain that I'm conscious that there's people on here in all kind of different industries and verticals and stuff like that. So I've kind of made the advice and really practical and actionable, but generic enough that it will work for the whole host of different industries and businesses that we have on the call. And kind of even if you're at a slightly earlier stage or at a slightly later stage, so if you're just recruiting for your user panel, or if you've actually got a product live in the market, there should be definitely some value in here too. So I've kind of tried to distill loads and loads of experience that I've learned working with lots of different startups into the next hour. So hopefully you will get some value from it, and it will help you feel more confident and better equipped to go out and find those early users to validate your business. I should have said as well, actually, that there's a lot of ground to cover and quite a few different slides. So all this is being recorded, so don't panic if you miss something. It is all being recorded, and we will distribute them.
We will put it on YouTube. So the former video of the webinar we had last week is on YouTube, and this one is going to be on YouTube as well. We will send you the link so that you can find them.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about me and my background, just to start off, is that I started my career agency side, working for a really big marketing agency, working with big brands on. One of the things that I was tasked with was supporting them with some of their intrapreneurship programs and some of their tactics that they were using to kind of have spin-off brands and businesses from within their business to help grow their core business. And that kind of lit the fire for me in my interest in startup. And I learned a hell of a lot about how these businesses were using some of the lean tactics and doing things that seemed quite counterintuitive at that stage. To help grow the business and doing it successfully. I was then recruited by the company called SPL International and worked really closely with a very entrepreneurial founder and significantly cut my teeth in starting lots of different brands that had hardware, software products. I was fortunate enough to take them from kind of inception and ideas stage to growing them, recruiting customers, and taking them to a point where we sold several of those brands, and we then went on to sell the business as a whole. So we had the next event from the business as a whole. So tons of great learning for me, and again, it's where I probably cemented my love for that startup, the startup world, and also realised that early stage of it was my favourite bit of the journey, and that's where I've focused my career towards, that early stage and how to do that successfully. Which is when I found Nova, and I've been recruited as head of marketing there, and I spend most of my time working with various different startups in their early stages to help them validate their business models through what might be kind of digital marketing campaigns, or in the very early stages, just kind of offering them advice and counsel on the best way to go about finding their early users and bringing them on board and making them care about what you're doing. So I thought it's worth calling out that actually, what is the purpose of your first customers? Because I think the first point that I put there to demonstrate demand is kind of obvious to everyone, and that's definitely a good thing that you should be focusing on to generate revenue and repeatability, and that it's scalable, because that's a great thing that investors will want to see. But probably the more overlooked purpose is the learning that occurs during this early stage. And when you go out to market with your product in its first format, you won't know. You'll have made a lot of assumptions about what it is, the value it holds, and throughout doing these early interactions and the manual elements of that I'll talk through shortly, you're learning all about what we need to build. You're learning all about your customers, what their pain points are, what they're interested in, what they're not interested in, the different elements of your product that seems to light a switch with them. And you're also, probably for me, most importantly, you're learning how to sell. I've probably encountered a handful of founders who are like, well, I don't really need to know how to sell because I'm going to outsource that, or I've got a SaaS business that's going to look after itself in terms of, we've got some software that's going to bring people in. The value of a CEO and a founder of a business and their ability to sell their business is kind of, for me, non-negotiable. I think it's super, super important for them, because that might not necessarily even be with customers. You're going to need to sell to investors and to suppliers, to your employees, to get them to come and want to work for you. So there's kind of three huge areas of learning that take place in this very early stage that I think are important to have front of mind. So one of the things that we focus on at Nova that's incredibly important in this early stage, and why they have a different rule set to the more established businesses, it's the ability to do things that don't scale. And that's actually one of the principles that we employ at Nova. It's one of our business's core principles. And I've linked to a blog here by Paul Graham that goes into some detail on that. But to summarize, it's talking about, as Luke touched on, the importance at the early stages of your business in that manual outreach, and how key that is. And it's kind of, the analogy he gives is think of it like a crank engine, whereby it's great when the engine is going, but you have to use your hand and manually get it going to get that engine running. And that's exactly what this early stage of the business is all about. And the importance of manual outreach. So one of the examples that I've found of doing things that don't scale that articulates it quite well is the company Stripe. So if you don't know them, they're a payment provider online, and you can see in their early stages they had a really basic, very lean landing page that they would kind of manually be networking with people, get them there, get them to submit their email address and details, and then they would manually outreach to each one of those, find people who were actually close to them, and they would physically go and meet them and put their software onto their computers. Now, that would never work in a scaled business to the size that they have reached now, and it almost feels kind of counterintuitive, because you're doing something that, wow, you know, when I've got 1,000 customers, that would never work because it would take too long to go and meet everyone and download our software. But at the stage they were at with their V1 product, it was exactly the right thing to do. And that's kind of the summary of doing things that don't scale. There are things that you can leverage at that scale that are absolutely the right thing to do that may feel counterintuitive. So another example that Stripe utilized very well is the over-servicing people and the focus on customer service in their early stages. So you can see I've screenshotted an example of an email there from one of the founders where he'd manually reached out to one of their early customers when they had like a countable number of customers, and in the middle of the night, we found the problem and fixed it for you. We're really sorry if this caused you any trouble. As ever, please let us know if you've got any questions and feedback. And you can see the reaction of the guy who's received. I said, thanks, Patrick, you guys are awesome. 2 a.m. support, and I didn't even email you. So again, he's leveraged the fact that they're small and the fact that he's the CEO and founder of that to give that guy an A-star, really top class bit of customer service. Okay. So carrying on from that and the kind of doing things that don't scale, one of the key things that I ask founders to do in the very early stages, whilst they've got a countable number of customers that they're going after, and generally in that 0 to 10 category or 0 to 100 category, is to get super specific about it. And I you know, it seems painfully simple and obvious, but I ask founders to just actually list out all of who their first customers are going to be, because we have people come to us and we're like, yeah, I'm extremely well networked. I know loads of people who are going to buy and use this product. And then actually when you get into that nitty gritty and detail of asking them to write them out into a spreadsheet, and as simple as putting the business name, what the website is, the name and some contact details for them, and importantly, their likelihood to buy in a column, and you start ranking them and saying, okay, I'll give that one a 9, or actually that person said that they were going to buy, but I've not spoken to them for 6 months, so they would fall lower than that. When you get specific, you can kind of understand, okay, where we're at. Have we actually got our first 50 customers, or actually do we need to go and do a bit more manual outreach to go and find them? And that's kind of fine if you haven't got them yet. And then some of the tactics I'm going to talk through now will help you to get to there.
And Paul, one thing I would say here, sometimes the research techniques that we have been discussing before can help you understand who your customers are going to be, because those customers most likely are going to be the people that participated in your interviews. So the people that you did a consumer panel with, the people that you interviewed, the people that filled in your survey, probably those are going to be your beta users, your early customers. That's why it is very, very important for us at the level, I mean, it's very, very important at the level of making an investment decision to have those records of conversations and to have a list of people who you think could be a first customer, or a first supplier, or a first wholesaler, or anybody that is involved in your idea. Make sense?
Absolutely. And a kind of like a piece of advice that I kind of frequently share is just kind of think in blocks of 10. So if you're at 0 customers, don't kind of, well, I suppose one thing that I often come across it where founders maybe go wrong is that they will come to us when they're at that 0 to 10 stage with big grand marketing plans and be wanting to, you know, sponsor billboards and show the side of buses and stuff like that. Now, some of these might be good ideas for your business, but doing them at the right stage is key. So I just say, think in blocks of 10. When you're at 0 customers, think about what tactics you need to do to get to 10 customers. And that might be just actually phoning around the people who you already know and have a relationship with, and convincing them to take the plunge and get on board. And then when you get to 10, think about, okay, now what do I need to do to get to 100? And then it's only 100 to 1,000 that you generally start to need to think about some of the scaled up marketing tactics at your disposal. And also put a point in there about start with a niche, because sometimes you may meet a founder who is feeling like, well, my business is like, Facebook, this could be for everyone, and we've got one of them businesses that, it's going to have worldwide adoption in a couple of years. But if you're putting yourself into that category, you need to start with a niche. Like you said, every business started out with a countable number of customers. Even Facebook started with Harvard, I think it was Harvard University, when they set out, and then started with universities and scaled out and out and out from there. So kind of, if you're in that position, start with a niche and then expand out from there. Okay, so when you're in that customer 1 to 100 phase, you may feel super nervous about going out and speaking to your customers or trying to get them on board to your business, because one, on the left-hand side, you can see that you won't have an established brand. You won't have a good reputation or credibility established yet in the marketplace because you're super early, and your product is most likely going to be fairly rough around the edges. The best startups and the ones that we should be modeling off are the ones that you actually use this and their size and their ability to do things more agilely than the bigger brands to their advantage. So things that you can leverage is one, that you can give your customers direct access to the founder. Okay, so that's really important. If you're a customer and you're speaking to the founder and CEO of this really cool up and coming tech startup, that makes you feel quite good. So you should leverage that. The ability to give a faster feedback loop to your customers in the early stage, as Stripe did. If they've got an idea or something that's going wrong or something that they would really love from the product, you may be able to take that feedback and implement it and then give them back, and that's a great experience for them. And leveraging, I talked in, if there's anyone here from the talk I've done previously about the Carno model and kind of delight attributes. So that's something that in the early stages you can look out for, and I've linked to that other talk later in this presentation if you weren't on that call. But essentially, opportunities to go above and beyond in customer service, you should be leveraging them to give like insanely good customer service at any opportunity, because that will really help generate people who love your brand and business and word of mouth referrals, like Stripe did in that earlier example. And also the fact that you have got that V1 product. People might be embarrassed of it, but the best startups use it in a way where they'll position it as, you can be one of the first people to try this. Join our beta user panel, join the waitlist even. It kind of completely shifts the fact that this mightn't be a very good product. So actually, if there's a waitlist for this, and whether you create that yourself to build that scarcity into it or not, it builds like the value of what you're selling, and actually people are more open and willing to come on board to that. And I put at the bottom, always charge something. Why I think that is important in gaining validation for your startup, and you should try and do that as quickly as possible, is that anyone will say your idea is great if you're not annoying about it. Now, it's a difficult one, this one, because we encourage people to do interviews and have a user panel and stuff like that. You can kind of, if you can demonstrate to us that you've been able to get someone with your very first rough product to go through your process and give you cash in exchange for that, because they find what you're delivering so valuable at that very early stage, that will kind of jump you probably 5 steps ahead of the people who are still working about just having discussions. Because like you said, anyone will say your idea is great if you're annoying about it enough. It's really difficult not to, and I'm not dismissing these tactics, but not to impart any bias in the early stages with surveys and focus groups and stuff like that. But actually, if you can get someone, this is where we should all be aiming for, to pay for your product at that very early stage. That will kind of leapfrog you a couple of steps forward in our sort of ranking of how your startup is doing, because it's the ultimate validation. People aren't just saying that to get rid of you. They value what you're doing really you know, to an extent that they're going to part with some cash for it. Okay, so before we jump into the different channels and tactics for bringing your kind of early user panel members or customers on board, I wanted to call out the kind of, across all of these, the execution is more important than the channel itself. Okay, so what I mean by that is and I've put an example in there, a quote that I heard recently, and it was from a friend, not from anyone on the program, but like, it was like, yeah, we tried Facebook, but there just weren't any of our target market on there. Now, there's kind of 2.5 billion people on Facebook, Joe, every month using the product. So it's kind of, I question that. And when you actually dig into what they've done on Facebook, it was create a Facebook page for the business and scheduled about a month's worth of posts. And then came back after a month, and then, you know, wrote it off because people hadn't beaten a path to their door to buy their product for them. Now, unfortunately, that's not the way it works. You have to be proactive, and I'll talk through some really good examples of that over the coming slides. But yeah, using the channel incorrectly is more often the problem than the channel itself, and most of all, us will have experienced this. So how many people have accepted someone on LinkedIn and then immediately receive that automated message from them that's a sales pitch, and you're immediately switched off from it? You can smell the sales and marketing BS from a mile off, and you completely switch off and go cold on that. So don't do it yourself, and hopefully I'll be able to give you some advice to ensure that you don't do that. And also, I think kind of, if you're a couple of hours research and self-education on a new channel that perhaps you might learn of today and think, well, that sounds interesting for me, is generally always a good return on investment on doing that, rather than just jumping in, because it will allow you to kind of just understand the platform that little bit better, so you can, to make sure that, you know, your execution within that is as good as it can be. Okay, so obvious one, and again, it is really obvious, but your own network should be the number one place that you start when trying to find your early customers and users. And why is that? Because one, you've already got that level of some element of trust developed with that person within your own network, so you should leverage that, because it's easier to sell to anyone who already knows you and has built up that level of trust with them. So I kind of looked at myself before this presentation, and it's kind of, I've got like roughly 2,500 people within my network from WhatsApp, email, LinkedIn, and across social media channels. So kind of what I'd encourage kind of everyone to do is actually spend a couple of hours or half a day going through their own contacts. And it might be that person who you went to school with, who you connected with on LinkedIn, who's actually in that market that you're building a startup for. That could be a really good person to leverage to get into that market. So it's kind of like, add them, go through your contacts, work out which ones are relevant for you in your industry, then add them to that spreadsheet and put a score against them as to how likely you believe you'll be able to convert them. Okay, so also kind of don't forget the 6 degrees of separation as well. And this is kind of something that is borne out to be true, and I'm witness to several times a week probably and over in terms of our own network. And you would be amazed how many people know someone who knows someone. So kind of leverage that fact as well. So even if it's not that person directly within your network who you know, who can give you that contact to your first customer, maybe it's someone that they know, and it's kind of like a real thing. So we often get emails sent around, does anyone know anyone in this industry that could help with this problem? And you would be surprised, even from our small network of maybe 90 odd employees, the amount of leads and introductions that make place through that and through the messenger networks that we have. Yeah, so I wanted to call out as well that there's a hierarchy of communication effectiveness when it comes to these kind of personal outreach tactics. So the top of the pit of the triangle that I've put onto this slide here is kind of the more richer form of contact. And like the advantages to starting at this point is that, one, it's more personal. It's two-way. You'll get deeper learning because you'll be able to actually, in them video calls or face-to-face, I appreciate that's slightly more difficult at the moment, you'll be able to look at the body language, actually gauge the answers that they're giving you with how much confidence they're attributing to them, and it'll help you score them as to like how likely they are to convert either now or at some point in the future. So it's kind of like, it also defines the relationship that maybe that you already have with them. So it's kind of like, if one of my best friends was a potential customer of my business, I'd probably just call around to the house and have a chat with them, and show them the product and say, look, do you think you'd be interested in this? Because I'd have that relationship there to be able to do that. Some of the less effective, but can still work, channels might be sending a form out to someone and asking for the feedback. So I gave this presentation a couple of weeks ago to York University, and a question came in about, I'm really struggling to get anyone to complete a survey that I've sent around. I've emailed out a couple of times now and no one's completed it. I was like, well, how many customers have you got? Or how many people in the user panel that you're trying to get feedback from? And the answer was 5. I was like, well, okay, so you've defaulted to email when there's probably richer forms of communication that you could be using there that will probably be more effective at this stage. You don't have to default to a survey form and sending that out. If you could actually get them all on a telephone call or organize a video call where you actually just ask them questions directly and got that feedback, that would be always a really good thing to do too. Okay, yeah, and again, the Nova network. So
I guess, Paul, you can use a combination.
Two people. Sorry, Pedro, did you have a question?
I guess you can also do a combination of multiple channels. So if you have to talk to customers, maybe you can start having face-to-face conversations with maybe 10, 20 customers. Then you can send a survey by email or by WhatsApp to maybe 100, 200 customers, right? So you can use a combination of them. You are gonna have some channels where you are gonna get more information. Those probably are gonna be the first contacts you make. As you already know more or less what people typically answer, maybe you can create a survey. And that survey is, I mean, you know how to create a survey because of the first interviews you do. And then you can go into a much larger audience through another channel. That could be email or WhatsApp or Facebook, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. But and I kind of say even that combination is important, and even kind of for me myself, like I was going to say on this, I've got kind of a call tomorrow with 2 people who are on the program, and it was kind of because they manually reached out to us and asked for some help and advice that I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, cool. And I'm going to get on a call with them and share some insight and feedback specifically about their business and their startup. But it's something that I'm still open to for Nova as well. So I look after the founder recruitment side of the business, and now I engage. Now I talk about Facebook groups a little bit later, but I engage on Facebook groups, and I'm open to a couple of calls a week with early stage founders. And I do that not specifically because we need the numbers on our program, because we generate quite a lot of interest for that, but it's actually for that learning, because actually I'm constantly speaking to those guys. I'm constantly refining our position, and I'm learning about what other programs they're thinking about joining, why, and actually getting that really deep understanding of that person, and just checking that our offering is right. Okay, so yeah, as I say, use the Nova network. We've got kind of a decent sized social following and community now. We've got a Facebook group that you should have all been invited to go on and actually share your project and progress on there. We've got an alumni of 70 plus startup founders within our portfolio, and an employee network of circa 100 startup builders. Kind of, yeah, it's just, you need to ask us. And like I say, I've got that call tomorrow because those people asked. So please don't be scared to ask. Next one is find an email and use it. So this generally works better for when you're trying to sell into larger organizations. And I was doing that earlier on in my career. What you would do and the typical chain would be, you would phone up a business, try and get in touch with that person. You'd reach their gatekeeper, and you'd actually never be able to get in touch with them or to get a direct line to that person, and it could be quite frustrating. So there was a couple of kind of techniques that I would do that would help me on that, because that cold email, when done well, can actually be really effective, and actually has opened a lot of doors for me throughout my career in terms of actually jobs, and also kind of I managed to get meetings. I'm on board retailers, and also kind of significant suppliers and stuff like that for us. So yeah, cold email can be really good. So the way I would use it is actually use LinkedIn to find the right person within that organization. You can go onto LinkedIn and search for a particular person or business. So for example, you might need to speak to the HR manager of a big corp. So you can go and find the name, you can call up the business and ask if you can speak to that person. You most likely will hit a gatekeeper there. Then in that instance, you would ask for their email. If they're not willing to give that out because they don't share it, you can use something called a Hunter Chrome extension. So example, what I can share there is I was just on buying some beer earlier. So this is why this is the example that I'm left on. But you can see with this Chrome extension, and I've linked to it there, that scrapes their website and pulls out all the associated emails that can find associated with that domain. Now, what that also tells me is the most common pattern for that is first name dot last name at Brewdog. So if I know that person's name, I can probably make a really good guess at what their email address is going to be. Or I can search it within there and maybe hopefully find them directly on here. Okay, so that's something to consider. And kind of if that fails, you've always got the fail safe of actually just Googling the person name and the business name. And so quite often you'll get a good hit back with that. So if you're at the stage where you've now got an email address, it's then about using it effectively. So, and this is where most people go wrong, is cold email is done so badly. It kind of really hurts me as a marketer to see the amount of really rubbish emails that I get in my inbox. So 4 tips that I want to share is 1, keep it short and grab attention. So it's fairly self-explanatory, but anything over a couple of paragraphs and it's going to get sorted into the later bucket. And that's not the receiver being rude, it's just the fact that they're really busy. And we'll think, oh, okay, I'll have to read that later. And quite often later never happens. So keep it short and grab attention. So be super clear on who you are. Articulate the fact that you're a founder of a business. And give a short pitch as to what your business is, and to build that little bit of excitement. Let them know what's in it for them, what is the value proposition for them, and make it personal. Okay, so maybe it's something like, I've had a quick look at your website and I've noticed X. I was in the store looking at your product and I noticed that it could benefit from this. So, okay, make it sure that it's personalized and have a specific ask for them. Now, this is where most of them go wrong, is that they're really vague on what they want the receiver to do. So it might be a generic, please help me with some advice, or, you know, I would love your thoughts on this. So that's actually quite hard for the receiver to answer, because they're like, oh, you know, am I going to have to go away now and write up, Joe, two sides of A4 on, you know, some feedback, what I think is constructive that they're looking for at this stage. And what is better is kind of like, if you ask for something like, if you could reply and let me know the one thing that would improve my landing page, or something like that. It's actually quite easy for the person to come back with some advice, and then you've started that conversation. You can start to nurture and develop that relationship and dialogue. So again, quick example of how not to do it. So I received this on LinkedIn the other day, but the premise is the same. So it was like, hello, sir, thanks for connecting with me on LinkedIn. And there's, again, no proper introduction and reason for reaching out. Please let me know if I can contribute and help you out in any way to achieve your personal or professional goals in the world of creativity. Again, no agenda, it's really vague, and I'm starting to smell that maybe this is a bot, an automated message that's coming through here. What does world of creativity mean? I'm not really sure. They go on to say, I noticed on your profile that we share some common interests and skills, and I'd be glad if you'd share some information and interest about the same. They want me to, you know, it's so vague, and there's no clear reason why I would do that. So I'm switched off at that point. And it's kind of like, I've put it in the bottom, it's also really weird that they've got smiley faces after each point. I don't know why they would do that, but a really bad example, and one that would get completely either deleted or just moved into, I'm never going to respond to that. On the flip of that, a really good example that I wanted to share was from a company called Full Story. I'll talk about why I really like this. So it's just kind of, it's really short and concise. So they open with, I wanted to give you a quick shout to introduce you to Full Story. a new tool that helps companies understand customer experiences like never before. Now, this was sent to the head of customer experience at a business. So immediately it's personalized, it's relevant. And if you're the head of customer experience at a company and you get an email that articulates that there's a new tool that helps companies understand customer experience, it's, you've piqued their interest instantly. Okay, then the next thing they said was the easiest way to get a feel for full story is to check out the 30-second demo of me interacting with your site. So they've gone to that, and whether this is automated or not, I'm not too sure, but they've actually gone to that level of personalization where they've been to the website, they've used their product on it, and they've shown how it works on their specific business. Okay, they've also called out that it's only going to take 30 seconds of their time. Now, look, everyone's busy, but everyone would click on that. If you receive that and it was personalized to your business, you would give that a watch. And then they sign it off with want the full story. You can take it for a 2-week free trial or shoot me a message if you have any questions. Now, what I like about that is that it's so kind of unpressured, and they're not doing that hard sell. It doesn't smell like someone who's desperate for a sale and really desperate to hit their sales targets. The fact that they're quite casual about that piques my interest, and I would probably go for the free trial. Okay, so next one that I wanted to talk through was Shapr. So Shapr is a business networking app. It's kind of like, I'm not on Tinder, thankfully, but I've been told it's like Tinder, but for if you cross Tinder and LinkedIn, this is what you'd get. And I like that they called out in their marketing messages that it's, an aspiring startup founder. So it's very relevant for kind of entrepreneurs, early stage business founders, and we use it at Nova. So it's kind of, I'll give you a quick demo. So you go on and you create a profile. So on mine, I've set up that, I'm interested in startups, looking to co-found businesses, and entrepreneurship and a few other things. And you can list what hashtags you're interested in there. And then their algorithm puts you together with people with similar interests on that. So it's kind of like, you can see there, that's matched me with this guy who's an entrepreneur based in London. So I would either decide, yes, I'd like to connect with them, or no, I wouldn't. So if I say yes, and I can see I've matched with that person there, so then I'm able to then send them a direct message. So again, it's a good way to quite quickly and easily find people to connect with who are relevant to you and your niche and your industry, and strike up a conversation and relationship with those. So that's where to look. Reddit is the other one, and there's a really good example on this. But for those who aren't familiar with Reddit, it's the front page of the internet, and it's a community kind of question and answer conversation forum. But essentially, what you can do is go on there and in the search bar, search things to do, keywords for your industry, and that will show you all the different subreddits related to your niche or industry. Okay, so whilst on the key tips is ask for advice, not customers. Go in and ask for help, and then you will start to develop those relationships. And the example I'll run through is kind of a really good way that someone has used it to find their customers before they build and validate what they want to build before they've actually gone out and done it. I've also included at the bottom a Reddit user guide, which is a good guide for anyone who's maybe not as familiar with Reddit. So the example I wanted to talk through, let me just click it because I've not opened it there, is from essentially this guy found a Reddit forum to do. He was a consultant, and he had an idea for a piece of software that he wanted to build that would allow him to prospect new customers by pulling data from LinkedIn and mapping out their kind of organogram, their company organogram, so he could see who was accountable to who and who the right people that they needed to speak to gain access to that. So he went in and you could see he posted in / the subreddit consulting, Python script turned into LinkedIn organizational chart. Is this useful? So that image that you can see there is what was on that link. So he posted that and said, this code is now local on my laptop, but I'm wondering if this could be useful in real life. Would you find this helpful in your consulting job? Now, what you can see there, as someone who has rebuilt org charts from LinkedIn manually? Yes. And then it's like loads and loads and loads of people saying, yes, this is amazing. I would pay money for this. I can see this being useful in supply chains, and lots of validation and feedback. You can see by the length of scroll that I'm having to do here, the amount of people saying, yeah, this is really good. So where I came across this example and why I loved it so much, because it was in a startup discussion, a startup thread, because the guy actually came out and said after the fact that when he showed this, it wasn't built. He had done no code at all, despite saying that it was on his laptop. All he'd done is created this image in Photoshop. And what he'd done by doing that is actually gain loads of validation that he was building the right thing before he'd had to commit any time to building it. So again, it's a really good example, and I've linked it there if you want to read a little bit more about that. I've also included some subreddits that might be useful for you. Ones like Alpha and Beta Users, Roast My Startup. If you post your startup project in there, you'll get a lot of people giving you some feedback on it. And also ones to do with Grow My Business Startup, etc., that are worth a look if you're thinking about getting into Reddit. Next one is Facebook groups. Now, it's a huge play from Facebook over the past couple of years. It's kind of like we're at a stage now where there's over 10 million different Facebook groups. So every niche has multiple different Facebook groups. So basically, I even demonstrated the example I put in there is like window cleaning. I was trying to think about the niche thing I could think of and demonstrate that there's groups for everything. So actually, if you're a window cleaner in the UK, there's actually forums and groups for that too. So some tips for what to do in Facebook groups. One, add value. Again, don't go in and go direct for the sell, and we'll talk through some examples of how not to do it shortly, but go in, add value to that community, because that should be your niche and what you're interested in starting a business about. So you should be able to add value into that. Ask for feedback, ask questions, and interact as yourself, not a brand. Facebook give the opportunity for businesses to join groups. About a year ago, I've not seen it done successfully yet, because people are kind of still quite protective over groups and see it as kind of like a safe, brand-free space. So go in and interact as yourself, and use it to intersect conversations and requests, which is a tactic we've utilized quite well at Nova. So a couple of quick examples on how not to do it. So you can see this guy who's just shared what I'm guessing is his business's post into a startup group. It's all right. You can see that he's got a co-working space and it's open in Warrington, but you can see he's had no engagement on that. And I just think it's a little bit lazy. He could have done better. He could have leveraged the fact that if that was me doing that, I'd have posted into that startup group and said, hey guys, I've been loving the value and content that I've been getting out of this group over the past months. And for this reason, that's why I wanted to give a discount to all group members. Just use the code, whatever your group name is when you're booking, would be an improvement on that. Another bad example is one, he's posted as a business. I won't go into all of the detail on there, but it's too long. You know, you're asking for quite a lot of time, including the video there, and it just sounds like a sales pitch. So one piece of advice to remember when posting and interacting on Facebook is that people are generally, when they're interacting on Facebook, they're sat somewhere with their phone in the hand, one-to-one with Facebook. So you wouldn't go up to someone and have a conversation with them the way that they've articulated themselves on that post there. So speak to someone as if you're having a one-to-one conversation, not as if you stood on a stage doing the Apple product announcements like what they have done there. Okay, so next example, and again, I had to include this one because it was just horrific. They've basically just literally copied and pasted their company one that's got, I'm not even going to count how many hashtags on there, but look, it's the laziest thing ever. And would you ever just walk up to someone and say, experience new ways to get started with business video? No, you wouldn't. It smells like marketing, so already I'm switched off from it. And yeah, just to comment, the use of hashtags, fine in moderation, but has a post ever gone viral from the inclusion of a hashtag? No, so you shouldn't be reliant on them or think that it's going to radically transform what you're doing. Okay, so a better example, and this was in Nova's own Facebook group. So someone went on and said, "Hi, fellow founders." So it's in a group that is full of startup founders. So it's personalized and it's like a nice approach. It said, "Finally got our page preview up," which is good because it's human. We understand that, it sounds like it's been difficult to get up there. Everyone can relate to things that take longer than what they anticipate. And then they've said, "Any thoughts or advice are always appreciated." So they've asked for help. They haven't gone in there with a sales pitch. They've gone in and asked for feedback and help, and that's the right way to do it. And what you can see is I went back, and in doing so, I've gave them some feedback on the product, how I think they could improve, which is valuable for them. But also now I know about chat decks and what it is. It's not relevant for me in my business, but I might know someone in the coming days and weeks who I can share that with. So that's a good example and a good way to engage. Now, another good thing about Facebook groups is that you can actually get a lot of value from intercepting the conversations that are already going on in there. So I'm in kind of lots of different startup groups, and I'll get a lot of value out of them and learn a lot. And kind of one post in particular, but this happens probably several times a week for me, is someone talking about a business that they're thinking about starting. They've got 3 app ideas that they're looking to validate and speak to investors. Okay, so then there's a discussion going on that. And I noticed that someone's talking at the bottom there about an accelerator in Liverpool that can help you with your MVP in exchange for equity. So that piques my interest because I'm thinking, we're based in Liverpool. Are they talking about us? And I'm learning. That's interesting because I'm learning about how people are articulating our business in their own words about us. So it's suggesting to me that we need to do some stuff with our positioning. But 2, I was able to then go back and say, "Hi, I agree with the advice," and Nova might be the company in Liverpool. Anyway, that guy went on to say, "Yeah, that was great. I had a call with him." And again, it was good to get that validation and learning from that one-to-one call that I had with that person. And they went on to join our startup program and are currently in the process as we speak. So again, a good example of how you can leverage Facebook groups. Okay, so this one's interesting. Competitor or same market followers. So maybe this one feels a little bit black hat, but I wouldn't say it is. So what I encourage founders to do is actually brainstorm some suitable accounts and locations where their target audience might congregate, and then look at their follower lists and follow and engage. So it's best to run through an example with this one. Now, one of our startups, and it's not one that I was involved in at this stage, but it's a good example of one who could leverage this tactic really well, is DLG. So they've got a suite of apps for Dungeons and Dragons players. So again, really nice, well-defined target market. So thinking about that, you could think, right, okay, where might I find people who are interested in Dungeons and Dragons? So if you go on to, I've used Instagram as this example there, and search for Dungeons and Dragons, you can see there's a ton of different accounts associated with that, tons of memes pages, interestingly enough. But if I click into one of those, I can see they've already built up a following of 4,000 odd people who are interested in Dungeons and Dragons memes, enough to follow them. So there's a good chance if they're interested in Dungeons and Dragons memes, it's because they're interested in Dungeons and Dragons. So then you can see their follower list, and you can go, if their profile is open, you can click onto them. And I've done that there, the first one. And this guy is he's posting loads of content about Dungeons and Dragons. What I would then do is go and engage in a couple of his posts, say how much I liked them, what they was doing, give him a follow, and hope that he would follow me, and then we can start a conversation. Now, I also include to think about locations in the same sentence, and this is probably because I've got a friend, and I just kind of love how lean it was and how much success he had with it. He worked doing some club and bar promotions in Ibiza for one of the big nightclubs out there. And what he used to do, the tactic that was most effective for him, was when people landed in Ibiza airports going on the holidays, they would more often than not take a picture of themselves and the friends who they were traveling with, tag them, and it'd be like, we've arrived in Ibiza, here for whatever. Now, if their profile is open, you can search, well, you can definitely search by location and see all the posts that have been tagged into that location. Then you can go onto their profile, click into them, and you can either send them a direct message or, again, follow them. He used to send them messages with discounts and tell them about what events that might be interesting to them that were happening in that week. Again, a tactic that you could use this for, again, not happening as much now, but trade shows. If you know a trade show where all your target markets are going to be at, see who's tagging themselves in posts there, what businesses, what people are there, send them a message and ask them if they want to meet for a coffee. Great, really lean way to find people who might want your product. Meetup Communities is another good one. And it's actually one that we kind of got into some really nice discussions with people across Southeast Asia when I personally was looking to learn more about the lay of the land over there. So if you don't know Meetup, it's a community platform whereby different niches create what was physical meetup events. Now most of these have shifted online, but the premise is still the same, and how you can get value from them is still the same. So as an example, so if I've just searched startups, that's showing me all the different startup groups close to me within 50 miles. You can tweak all of those. If I click into one of those, for example, I can then see all of the members on those. I can click into members here. And then if their profile is open, let's just pick one. Okay, cool. I'm able to then send that person a message. And basically I know that that person is relevant because they've gone out of their way to join a startup group. And there's ones for all sorts of different niche and categories. They're based locally to me. And I'm able to send them a message. So again, worth a look, worth a try if you're struggling to onboard your early users. Yeah, okay, so I've talked through that demo. Quora is another really good one, and there's a few startups that have used this really well. If you're not familiar with Quora, it's a question and answer platform, quite similar to Reddit, but the premise is the same, that there's different categories whereby people can go on, and no matter what you're struggling with, you can post a question on there and you'll get a flood of answers from people within that kind of sub-community. So there's a startup, an example of this that I really like, from a company called Veed.io. So they're a video editing software platform, an early stage startup in that space. So what they've done, and I've linked the blog to do with this, is used Quora to get their early customers by actually owning a category within there. So they owned the video editing software category, which is right up their street. That's really relevant to them. So they went on, and within the space of 2 weeks, they answered over 100 relevant questions with people were asking about video editing. They just go on. So what that immediately done was tell people that these guys know what they're talking about when it comes to video editing, builds that trust in them. But they also added the link to their website to every answer that they gave. Now, 2 years on, that still brings over 200 people per week to the website. And they don't use that massively anymore, but they're still getting that referral traffic from there, and they've helped them out massively in finding their first customers. Again, the blog goes into a little bit more detail than that, but it's worth a look. 10, almost, so second to last one. LinkedIn is one that a lot of our founders that we work with tend to believe it could be a really good routing channel for them. And more often than not, they're right. But a lot of them were utilizing it not in the best way. So we actually put together a guide that if you're in that boat, I would implore you to read. It's linked here, but it kind of covers, it's probably about 45 minutes worth of reading, but it covers all the main points to optimize your profile, best ways and tips and templates for connecting, engaging, and then messaging and taking it offline to convert. So that the kind of too long didn't read version of that is you should use LinkedIn to connect and start developing a relationship on that platform. Don't try and go for the sale straight out the bat. Like I said before, we've all had them instant sales messages fired at us, and we can smell it a mile off and just turn off. So what you should do is connect with people, engage in a couple of their posts, add value, and make sure that any communications at this early stage, whilst you can, personalise specific to them. So you should know what they're posting about, and be able to kind of find solutions and things that will help them out. Go on and offer them a demo, take it off the platform. We've done this with a couple of our startups now, whereby use a Calendly link and say, hey, I thought this could be of interest for you. If you'd like, and could spare 15 minutes, I'd be really happy to give you a demo. And then take that offline. In that conversation, you've got them to that face-to-face conversation level, and that's where you should try and go for the sale. But yeah, like I said, if you thinking LinkedIn's for you, I'd really encourage you to read that guide that we've put together. It's slightly out of date because I noticed he added stories, I think about 2 days ago to LinkedIn, so I need to update that, but I will do it in time. And final one, but it's one that's quite often forgotten about and overlooked. If you've done loads of hard work to bring on your early customers, kind of see how you can leverage them to get more. Because I was kind of thinking, and it's happened to me a few times in the past couple of weeks, to be honest. I know lots of other people in the marketing industry. So if there's a really good marketing product, there's a good chance that is sold to me and is providing me good value, and I'm really happy with that. There's a good chance that I should be telling other people about it. And I probably know 40, 50 other people in, relatively senior marketing positions who would benefit from that too. So don't be scared to ask people to go out and if they know anyone else who would find your product or service valuable. So you can see Buffer is one example that got pushed to me the other day. So I screenshotted and put in there because I think they could have done better, to be honest. They're a more scaled business. But where I think they could have done better, one, if it was plain text, so it looked a little bit less like a marketing email. Two, if they'd have personalized it specifically to me, not just in the name, because it just put hi there, but if they'd said, hi, I noticed you've been using this feature and this functionality of my product a lot over the past couple of weeks. Really happy that you're getting lots of value about it. Is there anyone else within your network who you think would also get this value? I'd probably be like, okay, yeah, there probably is. And if that was direct from the founder and CEO of that business, yeah, I'm more likely to take an action from it. Okay, so just to reaffirm on that one, that you can do that with prospects as well. So it's kind of, don't be scared to ask. If you get a no and someone says, no, it's just not right for me, actually, this product for X, Y, and Z reason, don't be scared to say, okay, would you know anyone else who might find use of what I've built? Because more often than not, they'll be happy to refer you on. And if you get a yes, ask if they know anyone else too. And if they won't refer the product, find out why, because that's another great learning that you can use to improve your product. Remember, kind of voluntary word of mouth is the benchmark. If you can build a product and your startup that is delivering as much value that people go out of their way to tell other people about it, that's a really good indicator for success, and that there's a good chance that this is going to go viral. So kind of, I was thinking, if someone was able to build a marketing platform that automatically optimized all of the campaigns we have running at any one time, that would save me hours and hours a week. And if they were able to do that, I'd tell everyone I knew in the marketing industry about it instantly like that, because it would be delivering that much value. So think about ways that you can actually spare on that referral mechanism virality to that. So they're the kind of 11 tactics I wanted to talk through. But if you kind of have listened to all of that and think, or maybe have actioned some of those and still thinking I'm still struggling a little bit, I'd probably encourage you to troubleshoot these 4 areas. One, be honest and frank with yourself and think, are you speaking to enough people? Because if you're just speaking to 1 or 2 people, it's probably most likely that's why you're not seeing the success in it that you want to. You need to up that volume. Think about, if the people that you're talking to don't have the problem you solve, are you speaking to the wrong audience, and do you need to pivot and think, actually, I need to try a different audience to that this might resonate a little bit better with. Maybe the problem that you solve isn't big enough, or it's not worth paying for. So there's a lot of kind of like really well articulated problems, but if kind of people won't pay money for them, maybe you don't have a business, or maybe you need to sort of just shift that problem space to make sure that you're hitting the right point of paying for them that's valuable enough for them to pay money to have it solved. Or perhaps as well, your solution isn't good enough compared to those existing solutions. So even as an MVP, a lot of people might misconstrue MVP as like just a really rough, quite shitty version of a product, but that's not right. That's not the right definition of it. Your MVP should still be delivering lots of value to the user. So you just need to consider, does your solution that you're going out with there, even if it's kind of not fully designed and delivering all of the functionality that you want, is it delivering enough value that people will want to use it consistently? Okay, so just to summarize, because I'm conscious we're just over the hour now. So most people are willing to help, but most people don't ask. So it kind of like, I get that it's in this very early stages of your business and of your startup, it can be quite scary, and you're worried about like juggling all the things that you've got on, as well as trying to do the amount of customer outreach in this early stages. But I can assure you the people that we encounter who do the best are the ones that just make that jump and actually just build it into their routine and their and start doing it consistently as early as possible. Okay. Most channel failures are down to poor execution. So I've kind of run through a few examples of that, but just make sure before you write off a channel that's not working for you, and that you've actually executed as well as you could do on that. And most importantly, do things that don't scale, and think about how you can use that to your advantage, because in that early stage, like I said, this is my favorite stage of a startup, the early formative stages, because of the amount of learning that can take place and how much you can shift your offer, and actually over servicing people and doing activities that might feel counterintuitive at the start can actually be the best thing that you can do for that startup. Okay, so if you found that interesting and maybe want to learn and understand more, I've linked what I referred to before, the Startup Marketing 101 that I've done a couple of months ago with our UK founders. So there's some further detail. It's kind of like the next step after this in terms of your marketing journey for your business. Yeah, so that's it really. So I'll kind of open it up now, whereby if there's any questions, Pedro, I don't know if did any come in. I did see a couple pop up, but I don't know if they've been answered.
Yeah, there are some questions here. Before we go to the questions, I would like to ask a question myself, which insists a little bit on the point on what is the kind of expectations for a good application, right? A lot of the things that you have discussed, a lot of the things that you have explained about how to get traction apply to problem validation. Because in order to validate the problem, you will have to talk to many people. And actually, this kind of problem validation, by talking to people, by having conversations, by having interviews, it doesn't always have to be face-to-face. It can be on LinkedIn, or it can be on Quora or something like that. That is very, very important. And actually, this kind of problem validation is one of the most important factors, not the only factor, but it's one of the most important factors to evaluate a startup that is on the paper stage, a startup that is on a very, very early stage. Sometimes when you talk to founders, they have done research, but it's sometimes third-party research. They have read a lot, but sometimes they have not talked to actual customers. They have read a market study about this industry, about the other industry, but they have not really gone to talking to people, and that makes a huge difference, right? So I think we could say that a lot of what you have said does apply to the stage of prior to the application, and a lot of these things are things that could add a huge amount of value to your application. Is that correct, Paul?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I was kind of articulating at the start. It's kind of like I get it. And I think from what you're saying that maybe you've encountered it too, and the people who come to us and they seem well researched and well read and can articulate a problem as fairly well. but actually you can't validate it until you go out there and start having those conversations. And often it is, Joe, it's a numbers game. Joe, speak to as many people as possible, and that will never really be a bad investment of your time, because the amount of learning that you will get from that, that you can feed back about what you should be building, when you should be building it, and actually the kind of characteristics of who you should be selling to is actually really, really valuable, even if you're pre-product stage.
Okay, excellent. Very good. Why don't we go to the questions? So there are some questions here already in the Q&A section. If you have more questions, please ask, and also vote for the questions, because we're going to answer them in the order of the most voted ones. So the first question is, hi, may I know how many recorded interviews Nova is looking at? Does it have to be video audio? Can it be by the way of Google Form? I guess it's not so much about the format, it's more about the content, right, Paul?
So just to check that I'm understanding, so this is someone maybe who is doing interviews with their user panel members, and they're looking how many people they need to do that with, and asking actually, could that be done by sending out a Google form? It could
be panel. Let's think if it is. Let's think it is a panel. Yeah. And let's try to answer what the expectations would be in case it is a panel. And then let's think maybe another situation which is this not a panel, it's just a one-on-one conversation.
Okay, well, I would say preferably it would be, like I said, I can't remember what slide it was. I think it was on one of my early slides when I talked about the richness of learning and the richness of different communication channels. So it was really early on. So it's kind of like, why would you not, if you've just got like a handful of people that you need to speak to, why would you not go for those kind of face-to-face video call, telephone call? And are you just looking to send out a Google form because it's easier for you because you're not? And are you putting off having those face-to-face or video screen conversations, because you'll get a lot more learning and a deeper understanding, because it's two-way. You'll get faster feedback and you'll be able to really understand, Joe, how much conviction, and you won't be able, maybe you'll be able to get a better understanding without implying as much bias as sometimes happens when you're sending out a form.
So imagine that you have a B2C idea, you're talking to customers who are people. How many conversations would you suggest it is recommended to have? And after you have those conversations, how many, let's say, survey interactions it is recommended to have?
I mean, it's a good question, and it's kind of like
because some people are asking this question all the time, and I mean, it's probably there is not a number written in stone, right?
No, and maybe Luke, I don't know if he's still on the call, may have been able to articulate
no, Luke is not yet
differently, but I suppose it's until you feel like you've fully validated that you're doing the right thing, and until you realize
until you stop getting surprised, until you stop getting surprises.
Yeah.
Or until you get a sense of understanding, really understanding your customer, right?
Yeah. And like I said, it's kind of like Google Forms and all that are cool, good way to do it. Video is better, but also kind of if you can get someone to a point, and again, this may not be possible, but where you can get someone to pay for that, that's the ultimate validation. So if you can get to the point where you've got 10 people pay you for what, that lean V1 version of your product, then I'd say, well, that's great. Do you know what I mean? And you're probably at a stage now where you could go in front of the investment panel.
Okay, so typically what we have, I mean, in conversations that we had, so in some telephone calls with founders, etc., and if you have had some telephone call with me, typically what we have said is that maybe 10 to 20 calls, maybe one panel with 10 people, or two panels, you have 10 and 10, 20 in total. And then after that, maybe 100 people in a survey. That sounds around good, but yeah. It goes on a case by case. It goes on a case by case, right? If you are more on a B2B scenario, you will try to prioritize face-to-face interactions or video interactions, like the panel, like the telephone call. If you are on a B2C scenario, while you are going to start on those face-to-face interactions. At some point, you will switch into something more scalable, like a survey, because just B2C is more massive. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense to me. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, very good. So let's go to the next one. Question. Let's say you have a product that is already validated by another startup who potentially is your competitor. How do you approach validating your idea in this case where your product is a bit better than your competition?
That's a really good question. So I would say, think about what are the biggest assumptions that your startup is making, that there's, because you're right in the fact that they will have already validated that there's probably a market for this product. But without knowing the detail of how your business is different or better than them, I'd say there'll be a set of assumptions around your business, because it's different and they're different for every business. But think about and rank and prioritize what's the biggest assumption that I'm making and what could I do to validate that.
So that's kind of the rocket internet model, right? Finding ideas that have worked somewhere else and bringing them to emerging markets. So the rocket was very successful here, right? With Lazada, for example. Okay, excellent. To have customers, it means our application should already be in operation, not in ideation stage anymore. That's a good question.
So I suppose to our customer, it means okay. So yes, but essentially these tactics, what we were saying at the start was that actually you could use those tactics to recruit user panel members if you're struggling for that. It doesn't necessarily have to be utilized just to recruit customers. If you feel you're earlier than that and you're still kind of playing about with ideas, maybe you could do like that guy on Reddit. I love that example because he had no product. He'd just been onto Photoshop and mocked up what he thought he could look like. And he was able to recruit loads and loads of people and gather email addresses at that early stage, pre-product. No product was built at that stage.
So it could be beta customers. It could be that you have, for example, a landing page where you are asking people to register and to volunteer to be beta customers once your product is ready, right? It could be something like that. Yeah,
absolutely. And like we do quite a bit of like kind of like fake door stuff. So maybe we'll mock up what the product will be like with, once it does go live, and actually just we can measure how many people we get to the website, how many people click on that, and then actually just at the last stage we'll say, hey, sorry, we're not quite ready just yet, but if you leave your email address, we'll contact you when the product does go live. That's a good way to do it as well before you've built anything.
Okay, very good. So the next one is to have customers. Well, this one we have done. Sorry, this is a very helpful slide for me. Will the slides be shared to all? Yes, we will be sharing the slides. There is a LinkedIn document that Paul has referred to, and there is also a research guide. There is also a research guide that explains how to do panels, how to do surveys, how to do these one-on-one conversations. Basically, what is the methodology to decide what questions you want to put in the survey? Because a lot of people typically ask questions, typically present a solution, saying this is my product. Do you like it? And then they ask a number of questions about, do you like this? Do you like the other thing? Do you like the other thing? And actually, that's not a good idea. Because particularly if your product is new, people are not really going to know if they don't know what it is so much. Is more about asking questions about what problems that person has. What are the problems the person has? And you can, because you are supposed to have had those face-to-face conversations, you already have an idea of what those problems are. So you can ask explicitly about them. You can ask what kind of alternative solutions the person has. And then you can ask a number of questions about that are going to help you design your solution. So, for example, imagine that your solution is about a digital platform for something, a digital platform for something, and you don't know if you want to do it on a website, you don't know if you want to do it on mobile, you don't know if you want to do it with something that has a pen in the mobile because it's something that requires writing, you don't know, you have some design questions, and those are things that you can ask. That will be a brief summary of my views on what are the questions you have to ask on a survey or also on a one-to-one conversation. Make sense, Paul?
Yeah, makes sense to me. I think that's well answered.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. Is there a minimum percentage of validation for the initial traction? I don't know what you mean by the minimum percentage. What do you think, Paul?
I don't fully understand the question. Maybe we can come back to that one.
So if you want, Randa, if you are able to provide more details about your question, we will answer. Okay. And then Sid, hello Novateam, thank you for organizing this. One of my questions is, how do you get specific on a B2C model and rate the likelihood to buy in a B2C model?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. But this is why I think it's about getting specific and actually understanding that every big startup, B2C, B2B, whatever, started with a countable number of customers. So that's where I was kind of explaining that, like, Facebook even started out with like one group of friends in one university in one dorm, and then kind of you just need to decide where you want to niche in on. So that could be like a location, it could be one business sector. If you're kind of targeting, you're in that camp of, you know, everyone could be our customer, you need to niche in and get to that point whereby you can list down the people who you know. So start with your own network. So who within your own network would buy your product? If you're kind of a big mass scale B2C, write them into the spreadsheet. And in terms of how would you rank their likelihood to buy, speak to them. Show them the product that you're going to make. If you've not made it yet, or show them the actual product and say, would you do that? Get some feedback and learn from that. That's where I'd take that.
That's a very interesting point, because some people present a very grand design of a solution that is like design at, I would say, like an engineer. There are going to be these three models. The supply chain is going to have these three models, or it seems that everything is covered. There are multiple kinds of scenarios, and it looks like a huge solution. But actually, rather than having a small depth on a large scope where you have multiple scenarios, it is better to have a much deeper depth on a very simple scope. Because at the end of the day, when you get started, you are going to start on something that has to be very tangible, on something that has to be very hands-on. And I think that sometimes the ideas that I have seen have a design or a scope that is extremely large, is extremely complicated. Even, for example, if you think about Gojek, when Gojek started, it was a delivery business for B2B. So they didn't even think about what they are now, which is like food delivery, ride-hailing, etc., etc. I think and that's not a problem, because you can start with something tangible, and then little by little discover that way is maybe not the best, and then you pivot into other ways.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying about just thinking blocks of 10, because the acknowledged thing that we know about startups, and maybe others don't realize it, is that they will change anyway. So it's kind of, and it's only through changing, by getting out and speaking to those people, getting the feedback, and actually just shaping it as you grow. Very
good. Let's go to the next one. Wei-Wen. My experience has been that even though I tried defining the problem and talking to users, it wasn't easy because I didn't talk to the right user segment, so they didn't have the problem. I am only discovering the problem after launching the actual solution and testing it with tens of customers in the last 6 months. So my take is don't spend too much time at the ideation or problem. Go to get your first customers, pivot and learn, which is actually what we have just said, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, this is a So this is, I mean, a great
really good
comment.
advice, and good that you've learned that, because that's the quicker you can get product or something into customers' hands, the more learning you will achieve.
And it doesn't have to be, because some people think that it has to be a very perfect kind of product. It can be something as simple as a landing page, which is what we were saying before, right? It doesn't have to be a finished version. It doesn't have to be something that is going to take you 6 months development. Actually, if it takes you, if you don't have something to show around in less than a month or a relatively short time, probably you are overdoing it, right?
Yeah. So it's about kind of at that early stage understanding what the biggest pain point that you're going to solve is, and then figuring out what the leanest way. And that might be through a website, it might be through all the different code tools that are about and available now. That's going to be different for each startup, but kind of delivering something quickly that solves that biggest pain point in the leanest way possible is the way to go. Okay.
The next question from Puji: is it better to launch the website or the mobile app first? Let me take this one because this is very particular about Asia. If it is a B2C solution, in Asia, the rule of thumb is to go mobile first. As a matter of fact, in Asia, a lot of people have leapfrogged from nothing to mobile without having a computer, right? And this is the case in almost all emerging Asia, right? If it is something that is B2B, maybe it's different. However, the mobile capabilities will be important. But in Asia, a lot of most of the startups have leapfrogged directly to mobile. That was not the case in developed economies. However, this is what most people do in Asia. Having said that, it depends on a case by case. But the rule of thumb will be something like that. Make sense?
Yep.
Delicia, if you have identified a problem, how do we go about selling the problem or helping people identify the pain before we can proceed to validate? Yeah, so this is people who have a problem but they have not yet realized that they have the problem. So how do we make them realize? This is, for example, there is a very typical case about the guy who invented the cars, the guy who invented the cars, right? Like Henry gasoline Ford. Cars.
You thinking of Henry Ford?
I think this quote is by Henry Ford. So he says something like, if I had asked people in New York at the end, 10 years ago, that was probably the end of the 19th century. If I had asked people in New York what problem they had, what they wanted, they would have probably said that they wanted to have faster horses. So they had not identified that basically having something like a car is something that could add value to them. But this is a difficult question. What would be your take?
Yeah, I suppose it is difficult. I suppose what you can do though is when you're speaking to people is propose a solution that you're thinking of, and whilst you've got that small number of people, you can actually get that rich feedback and actually say, Joe, what if this was available? It's difficult. It kind of is more difficult, but it's kind of like trying to validate what is that pain point that you can solve that people will be willing to pay for, and probably do that before you invest a lot of time building this big new innovation. So look at kind of lean tactics that you can employ before you build it, if it is so cutting edge and new that people don't know that they're experiencing that.
This is a very difficult case, because if it is a problem that people do not realize, I said before that the rule of thumb will be to ask about the problems, what problems you have. Right? What problems you have and how are you solving them right now? If it is something that is not perceived immediately as a problem by people because it is a need you create, it is much more difficult. And this is probably an exception to the rule that I was talking before. I think I would still start asking about, you have to do a lot of thinking Probably you need to have a lot of unstructured conversations with customers.
Yeah, but yeah, it's difficult without knowing all the specifics of the startup. But what I'd probably do is think about what other businesses have been in that position before, and then look at how they done it in the early stages. Now, like, there's loads and loads of really good startup blogs. So if you can kind of think, well, that business done it, and no one had ever seen or used that product before. How did they go about doing that? And actually, you can go out and reach out and speak, try and get in touch with someone who was in that early stage of that startup and ask them how they done it. Or quite often, if it's a big famous one, there'll be something published about it.
Okay, very good. So here we have Sultanur from KL. How about using multiple channels with the same ads? Can you use multiple channels with the same ads? Or do you have to personalize your ads to the channel that you are using?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I'd say it depends on what stage you're up to with your business, if you need to utilize ads to get those early customers. Because I'd say in most businesses, if you're 1 to 10, you probably don't need ads yet. If you're 10 to 100, maybe if you can't manage all these manual outreach and doing things that don't scale, maybe at some point on that journey, you'll maybe need to start thinking about ads. So it's kind of like a question, if you're not up to that bit yet, do you actually need ads, would be my first point. But then second one, what was the question again, Pedro? Sorry, so something about, can you use the same creatives in different...
Can you use the same ad on multiple channels?
Yeah.
And I understand the question is, do you have to personalize your ads to the channel that you are using?
Yeah, again, it's a super broad question, but yeah, you have to personalize in terms of like the spec and stuff like that, so you're creative to match that. But what you should do, if possible, is to actually add, if you're at, like, it feels like a scale marketing question. If you're kind of looking at using multiple different channels for your startup, you would have a campaign, and you'd have a creative concept that underlies the whole campaign across all of the different channels, and then you would tailor that to the nuances of each specific channel that you're using. For example, you might have a lead ad specifically on Facebook, because you can do that and you can get people's data natively on Facebook, but on Twitter you can't. So maybe you'll have to use the video asset that you've used there, but direct them to a landing page to capture the data that way. So yeah, there's always an element of tailoring it specific to the channel. But if you're at that scale marketing tactic, make sure that there's a campaign, so there's a consistent creative and message that's going across all of them.
Okay. The next question is there a proportion fit to get a validation from nearby connection or outside a work connection? I don't know if I understand the question, but I think the question might be, from the people that you reach, do they have to be people you know that are your connections, or is it better that this is people that you don't know? This is maybe friends of friends.
Yeah. Obviously, I'd start where there's more trust. It's easier to get buy-in from people where you've already built a level of trust there. So maybe if you've worked with them in the past, they know you, they trust that you wouldn't just be trying to push something onto them if you didn't think it was valuable. Then yet start with people who you have the higher levels of trust with, and then work down the line from that. Once you've exhausted those, move on to the friends of those people, and hopefully delivering enough value in those early stages that they will tell them and give you a good backing to do that.
Okay, very good. So let's go to the next one. As an ideation founder, we haven't started anything yet, but we have the MVP name in mind. Can we start introduce the name during the interviews or during the questionnaires? Is it, and that's a very good question. So a lot of founders at this kind of stage, even in the application, refer to their product with a name. Is that founder bias? Is that a good marketing technique? What do you think should be the right approach? Not only, I would say, in an application like here, but also when talking to customers.
Yeah, really interesting question, and I've seen it done both ways effectively. So I'd say don't obsess over if it's the right or wrong thing to do is to give her a name, because if what's more important at that stage is not introducing other biases that could shape like the features and functionalities. Names can always change, and often if you look into businesses in their early stages, they were called something completely different, then they realized they couldn't trademark it and change. So it's kind of like, I personally, for me, I don't mind founders in the early stage giving it a name, because one, it makes it feel more real for them. And actually, if something as simple as actually giving something a name, knocking out a logo on Canva and putting it onto a landing page, as well as kind of the validation for external people, that the feeling of importance and the feeling of making it feel real for the founder there's definitely value to that too, and keeping your motivation levels high.
Okay, excellent. Next one is, if businesses have the same target segment but don't compete, Facebook analysis could be really good, right? I'm not so sure I fully understand.
Same time. I'm not sure I understand that one.
So maybe if you can ask this question maybe in a different way, and then we will try to answer.
Yeah. And also just to remind as well that I put my email address in the bottom of these slides as well. So when they get sent around, feel free to pick up with.
And then you have I'm gonna put it in the. You have this address. You have this website in order to book an appointment with Luke, etc., etc. I'm gonna post it again. Next question: how do you think if a founder use a combination of social enterprise mission and a startup mission, which I understand is for profit, which not only focuses on profit-oriented and problem solving, but also empower community for long-term sustainability? So I think the question is, you have a startup that has a social mission. Obviously, the startup also needs to make money for itself, otherwise it wouldn't be sustainable. How do you do that? How do you create a social startup? And what will be the best practices to create a social startup?
So what do you mean by a social startup, like a non-for-profit, something like that?
I think it will be a startup that on top of the business objectives that every startup has, also has an objective to empower a certain community, whether it is people with, whether it is children or people with a specific disease, right?
Okay, well, I think first and foremost, you have to be genuine about it. And actually, it's a really big topic for me, and one I'm quite passionate about, because I've seen so many big brands. It feels like a big brand question though, because there's kind of a lot of big brands debating this, and who purport to really care and be empowered about like global warming and saving the planet and that, but actually then don't live and breathe it because they tax dodge and stuff like that. So for me, the most important thing is, if you've got like a social mission that you want to do, actually live it and get as close as possible to them as possible. But I would say make sure that that's, if you're going to do that, it feels like something you should be tackling. And again, I don't know the detail, but maybe later stage when you've got the time and resource to do that properly, because there's nothing worse than kind of someone saying, "But Joe," where people can smell that they're just trying to leverage a really good cause for their own marketing benefit. So where would I say, if you want to empower a community for long-term sustainability, again, it's a strangely worded question, but one, get as close as possible as you can to that community and add value to them. That would be my simple advice, because if you do and you can add value to them, they'll love you for it and they'll tell their friends about it. Okay,
very good. I have just posted on the chat section the link that you can use to book time, particularly with Luke, who handles the pipeline in Liverpool. So you go to that link and you can book some time. From now until the demo day, as I say before, is November 10, 11, and Thanks, Paul. Shall struggling entrepreneurs chase a sponsor who can net a ticket price of $10,000, or a general person with a ticket of $4 to $5 on the same category? I think the question is, do you want to have an angel that can give you $10,000, or do you want to do crowdfunding? Crowdfunding in one of the crowdfunding platforms where people can invest as low as $4 to $5.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, and you could probably do a full presentation on that, but I'd say there's definitely pros and cons to both. The biggest pro for me in kind of the second one, in kind of going for the crowdfunding Kickstarter model, is that you're building a community at the same time that's also validating that business. If you can create a Kickstarter that does really well, you've got all of those people who've invested some cash because they want to see your product to market. So that's probably, without knowing the detail, I think the value of having that community is increasingly important for startups. And if you can nurture that community well, that will kind of kickstart your startup straight off the bat.
Okay. Do startups need a CRM tool?
Yeah, it's interesting. At some point, possibly, depending on your startup, but that spreadsheet that I said is your very first lean CRM system. So if you can just list down the contact details of those people and have a notes column and just say, spoke to them on this date, they said they were really interested, I'll call back on this date. You can do it in a spreadsheet to start when you have that countable, really small number of people. Then when you get past that stage, yeah, maybe when it's becoming a problem and unsustainable, maybe look at, HubSpot or Salesforce or one of those guys. A lot of them have very good plans available for startups. We're actually a HubSpot partner, so we get a really good discount rate with that.
Okay, very good. So here we have a clarification about the question about what was the percentage of validation that you expect, right? So here he says, I mean minimum percentage validated data that can be converted as initial traction for the basis create. Let me see. I have interviewed. So, for example, I have interviewed 20 people. Do I need to have a minimum of 10 people that say that I do have the problem? So the question is, how much percent of the people that I interview need to tell me that they do have the problem? And I think this question also depends on how targeted your survey or how targeted are you when you are reaching to people? Because if you are reaching to people in a very narrowly defined, well-targeted community, the target of your target segment, probably that percentage will be higher. If you are a little bit less targeted and you are reaching people that might not be at all your customers, that percentage will be lower. But is there a rule of thumb?
For me, no, not really. The more, the better. But probably what I'd say advise is actually book in with Pedro, with Luke, and get into specifics, because it can differ.
Yeah, it can differ on a case by case. Yeah.
Depending on what business, what industry,
so if you book,
and what questions you're asking.
So if you book one session, you can ask these questions, right?
Yeah.
I haven't decided a brand name, not an MVP. I plan to have a survey what people expect from this coming service, how to manage to have people fill the survey to be early adopter later on. I would say that one of the questions that you can ask is, would you want to be a beta tester? Would you want to be an early adopter? Would you want me to contact you back when my product is ready? What else can they do?
Yeah, and talk about the problem that you're going to be solving. Because like I said, as a marketer, if someone sent me a message and said, look, I'm building this product and it's going to save you 10 hours a week of the analysis that you have to do on all the campaigns that you're managing. Do you want to help, Joe? You're able to give up 15 minutes of your time to give me some feedback and thoughts on this idea? I'd be like, absolutely yes, because that's a big problem for me. And the potential win for me could be 10 hours a week. Imagine getting someone to give you 10 hours a week back. So sell the problem that your product is going to solve. And if you've hit that right, people will be interested to engage even at the early stage.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. What is the best way to communicate pricing scheme, the pricing scheme, with early adopters? If you are in the MVP stage, we have a pricing scheme that is higher compared if I reach broader adoption of the product, which then will reduce the pricing scheme. I don't know if I understand the question.
Yeah, I think I understand it. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I think what they're saying is they've got a start price, but when they reach a certain scale or number of sales, they're planning to lower that price because they'll have economies of scale. So maybe they can buy their product cheaper, but when they get to this space. So it's a difficult one again without knowing the detail. So maybe a call might be a good option for that. But what I would say is kind of in that very early stage, MVP stage, it's fine to change pricing as you go, and that's kind of expected. But I think if you can get people to pay anything at all, that's a great thing, because without knowing the detail of your business, that's really good, and it's fine. I find a lot of people are really worried showing their product because they're like, oh, well, I don't know enough about, what's a maximum price. You can test out different pricing models actually by kind of having different versions of your landing page. And again, it's difficult to give an articulate answer because I don't know your business. Driving people to different landing pages or testing different pricings on the buttons and stuff like that, and just measuring how many people click, because ultimately you want to be able to charge as much as possible for that. So it's kind of like, if you're thinking that you're going to drop prices when you get so many customers, I'd say, do you need to? Because if you've managed to recruit people to pay the higher price, why would you offer a discount on that just because you're doing better and have managed to recruit more customers? So it's kind of like, if you're able to charge more, always do it. But maybe we could go into more detail on that one if you call.
So if I can paraphrase the one of the entrepreneurship professors that I had at university during my MBA, and this is a rule of thumb. So it might not apply everywhere, but the rule of thumb is you probably should price slightly below the comparable solution, but not much below. Because lowering prices is always possible and it's always easy, but raising prices can be very complicated. So there is always time to lower the price, but if you have to raise it, that could be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's more of a problem for bigger businesses. When you're at the MVP, if you've only showed this to 100
because less people know you.
Yeah, if you've only showed it to 100 people, maybe you can then leverage the fact that they've got a cheaper price, and you need to say, look, Joe, we want to really look after you because you were an early adopter. So that's why we're going to lock in this price for you when we up it to everyone else at the end of this month.
That's correct. That's correct. Very good. Next question is, as a starter, only in MVP stage, any advice how to protect our idea confidentiality, because the stronger companies may copy the idea? Wow, that is tough. How do you protect your idea?
It's a difficult one, and I can't say definitely that they wouldn't, but in every instance that I've ever came across of this being a fear of the founder, it's completely unfounded. And I think it was, I can't remember which, is it Eric Ries who talked about in the Lean Startup, whereby he challenged several founders to actually email their product ideas to these big companies, Joe, the head of whatever technology at these big companies, and see if any of them could actually action it. So it's kind of
probably they could not.
Yeah, exactly. None of them could. So it's kind of, in most cases, you should be leveraging the fact that you're a startup, that you can move quicker than them. Now, all right, they've probably got more access to resource, but these people aren't just sitting around in their office going, I wish, someone would, I would come across this great idea that we could steal and do it. They're busy with their own things, and they'll be innovating in different spaces, and it's a difficult one. But I'd say you kind of have to, if you're able to, and agile enough, you will kind of find the right way, and where that big company isn't servicing them.
Okay, let's go to the next question. How do early validation. How do you do early validation for a product that has a hardware component, especially in COVID times? You are working with a lot of hardware startups in Liverpool, and Liverpool, correct me if I'm wrong, but is one of the most impacted cities in the UK right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I'm not going to lie, it does make it more difficult, especially if you're needing people to physically touch, wear those sorts of things. But it is possible, and again, it's probably one of those that needs a slightly deeper conversation, because depending on the hardware element, is it something that you could send out to people, get them to send back, get in a sanitary condition? Is that possible? But also kind of what validation could you get through a screen, Joe, actually, depending on what stage you're at, actually showing people things, sending them a slide deck of how it's going to work, and maybe a nice video that you're able to record or mock up that shows things like renders and how they're going to work and how that's going to interact, and just having a call with them and saying, what do you feel about that? Will give you some level of validation.
Okay, very good. So, well, we have 4 questions. Let's try to do them.
Cool. I've got another call in 10 minutes time, so I can probably stay on
10 minutes, yeah, which is going to be after the 2 hours. So we're going to try to finish in 10 minutes. So Jeffrey, what is the most effective way to acquire users or sellers for e-commerce marketplace, especially when there is no MVP? From their point of view, there is no incentive and benefits for them to take up their time to work with us, especially this idea might or might not happen. And there is nothing for them to test and feedback. In reality, Asian people, especially in developed countries, are very concerned when we need to take their time to help on something that might not happen. Yeah, probably particularly in developed Asia, that will be Singapore, maybe Hong Kong as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how to convince? So he's saying how to convince a seller or a wholesaler in an e-commerce company is a B2B conversation, but you don't have the product.
So, I mean, it's a difficult one without knowing the detail. I think I might be speaking to Jeffrey maybe tomorrow, so we can go into a little bit more detail. But
okay.
One other question: what is the quickest, leanest thing that you can do to deliver some value if you believe that you've got none? Is it possible to concierge that service for them? So we've had startups who kind of in the recruitment space who actually just before we built the technology behind that, they validated the idea that it was a good idea and that people would pay for it by actually manually working with the candidates and the schools that they were going to place them in, and actually doing all that bit manually themselves. And Joe, maybe to that customer, pertaining that was being done by technology. Do you know what I mean? So they don't know, but you're behind the scenes pulling all the different strings and matching the two people together to add some value. And quite often there is lean ways that you can deliver value to someone quite quickly. So depending on what their problem is that your business is solving, probably just do some ideation around that.
Okay. Well, Desmond, as a start, is it better to just use UX, UI, and workflow to show to potential customers before building the whole backend? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
The answer is absolutely.
We do that quite a lot with like Adobe XD files or job forms and stuff like that before building it.
Okay, very good. And the last question, and we still have 8 minutes, so that's quite good. What is the best way to communicate price? Oh no, we have done this one, right? Sorry, we have done this one. Answer live. Yeah, we have done this one.
Cool.
Perfect. So I thank you so much for everybody who is connected here. This topic about how to get traction and what are the different techniques to get traction does apply to not only to the moment in which you are funded and you have an MVP and you are starting getting actual clients. The reality is that this kind of research or this kind of marketing or primary research applies also, is one of the expectations that any investor will have at this very early stage, because it's the way of validating that this is a real problem, is the way of validating that people are interested in your problem and in your solution. So this is the way you show traction at this very early stage. And obviously at a later stage, there will be other KPIs, right? Perfect, so thank you very much. Next week, there is another webinar on Wednesday about how to pitch. As in a nutshell, I will tell you that the pitching is, at this very early stage, is mainly about the problem, not about the solution, but we will go into that next week. And then, well, you have this link. You're going to get the link anyway by email, and you can book time with Luke or with Paul. And you can get your
question in the chat about that. Actually, someone was just asking about what that link is, and just to confirm, that's so you can book in time just for like a drop-in session. So if they've got any questions about Nova, the program, or actually the progress that they're making through Lean Stack and the activities that they're doing,
absolutely,
that's what they can do that for.
Okay, well, excellent. So thank you very much. I think we are done for today. It is now 10 p.m. in Kuala Lumpur and in Singapore, almost 10 p.m. in Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, a little bit earlier in Jakarta, 9 p.m. And I believe it is 3 p.m. almost in the UK. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much to all of you, and I hope to see you soon next week. Okay, thank you. Thank you very, very much.